Today I have a very straightforward painting tutorial for you all as I paint up this zombified rhino from the Marvel Zombies board game. Welcome to Treehane Miniatures. I begin by priming the miniature with Pro Acryl Dark Camo Green Primer. I'm choosing this color to keep the necrotic theme of the character. Since this is a primer layer, it will have very little impact on the final look of the piece. This will be covered almost entirely by the subsequent acrylic layers. But since acrylic paints are translucent by nature, this dark green camo primer will subtly influence the hues of the colors painted on top of it. I feel like this color better represents the undead look of Zombie Rhino than the typical colors I choose for priming a miniature. That, and it is always fun to try something a little different from my usual approach to painting. If you didn't see my video for the Living Hero version of this character, I chose to go with a dark purple primer, which I believe better reflects the living version. I'm performing all of the airbrush work on this miniature with the Gallery Turbox Mini Compressor and GAD39 airbrush, which was provided to me by Gallery. Discount links for the Turbox Mini are in the description below. However, I'd suggest watching my full review of this compressor airbrush combo to see if it's the right product for you before making a purchasing decision. For the first gray paint layer, I'm using Vallejo Gray Green. I'm spraying this from above the miniature at a downward 45-degree angle. This layer maintains the green hue of this zombified supervillain. We will need to shift this color towards a gray hue to make it look more like the comic book character. To make this shift towards gray, I'm using Vallejo Light Gray airbrush paint over the gray-green layer. I'm spraying this from a much steeper angle above the miniature. The more an area faces the imaginary light source, the brighter I make it. I imagine the light is coming from the model's upper right side, so I place more of this highlight color there. I build up the opacity of the light gray on the most upward facing areas. If you're familiar with zenithal highlighting a miniature, this is basically the same thing. The only difference here is that this isn't underpainting. These are the final colors for the miniature. I'm intentionally leaving the left side of the model much darker than the right side because I know I want a bright orange bounce light on the left side of the miniature. Object source lighting, or OSL, looks much more convincing when it's placed in a shaded part of the miniature, so that's what I'm preparing for. For the base of the orange OSL, I'm using the airbrush one final time to apply a layer of crimson acrylic ink. I want it to look like the orange glow is a bounce light coming from below the miniature's left side. I used the airbrush to spray from this direction. I'm spraying the ink from the location of the light source. This way, the paint catches all of the same edges and surfaces that the light would affect. This is a very practical way to lay down the foundation for an OSL glow. Of course, this can alternatively be accomplished with a standard paintbrush, but it would take significantly more time and require more thought on my part. The advantage of using an airbrush for this step is how quickly and effortlessly it informs us where the light should be painted. However, it is important to keep in mind that paint does not diminish in intensity as it moves away from the source, as light would. Therefore, I never use the light source's actual color in this initial OSL step. I choose a darker hue. I choose a color that represents the darkest effect of the light as it would diminish in intensity across the character's features. So for this example, I'm using a deep red color as the base for the orange object source lighting. This red ink will represent the darkest outer edges of the OSL as it fades over the curves of the character's anatomy. I'll use a standard brush to intensify the orange glow within the boundaries of this initial red layer, and I'll make the glow most intense on prominent features that are directly facing the light source. Before continuing with the OSL, I first use Bony Matter Speed Paint to shade every part of Rhino that isn't going to be gray or orange. This includes the rotting flesh on his face, the festering pustules on his back and his arms, the fingernails, and his rhino horn. Returning to the OSL, I begin building the orange layer with Vallejo Clear Orange. The nice thing about using this color for the orange glow is that it dries very transparent. This allows me to gradually build up the glow's intensity exactly where I want it. A single layer of this paint will blend very naturally with the red base layer. It's almost like this paint is purpose-built for layering. I still thin it a little with water so it flows off my brush properly, even though the translucency is already perfect for layering. Where possible, I draw my strokes toward the light source. But the heavily textured surface of Rhino's hide doesn't always allow for this, and I often find myself highlighting along the folds and ridges of the suit's skin. I don't feel that the OSL on this piece is necessary to make it look complete. There will be enough interesting things to grab the viewer's attention once I flesh out all of the rotting pus bubbles on the character. I have chosen to use OSL on the characters from this game, mostly for gameplay purposes. I'm painting all of the superheroes from the game with blue OSL, and I'm painting all of the zombie heroes from the game with orange OSL. With so many similar looking models on the game board, I feel this will help differentiate them and facilitate gameplay. The final highlight for the OSL is made with a mix of Vallejo Clear Orange and Ice Yellow. Just as I added the clear orange layer within the existing red base layer, these yellow-orange highlights will get painted within the clear orange layer. This is the final brightness for the OSL. I make these highlights significantly smaller than the orange highlights. I want orange to be the dominant color for this glow. If I make these highlights too large, it may shift the overall appearance to yellow. Even though I say that this OSL isn't an essential component of the fully painted miniature, I do feel it adds to its appeal. I really do enjoy dramatic shifts in lighting across a model. To me, it makes the model look more dynamic. It tells a story about the environment that the character is in. I also enjoy how the miniature looks different when viewed from various angles. I often use OSL as a sort of cheat to speed up painting a miniature. I use it kind of as a speed painting hack, but that's not what I'm doing here. These last two layers for the OSL are the most time-consuming part of this project. This isn't a marathon painting session by any stretch of the imagination. It took me about an hour and a half to paint this guy, but a good portion of that was spent just painting the OSL. Personally, I think the extra effort is worth it because it makes the miniature look a little more unique and different from what most other painters do. Painting the rest of the model will be a much more standard affair. I layer some necrotic flesh over the bony matter speed paint on the face, nails, horns, and spikes. And I leave plenty of bony matter visible in the recesses. This is very easily accomplished on the face and nails since these features are so prominent. As long as I'm careful not to overload my brush with paint, there's little risk of obliterating the bony matter shadow color. For the rhino horn and the spikes on the back, I leave the base of the features darker. I build up the opacity of necrotic flesh more towards the tips of the spikes and horn. Whether the rhino's face is supposed to be an exposed skull or rotting flesh, I am not sure, but I'm leaving it necrotic flesh colored either way. I'm using salmon rose only on the rhino's gums. Fortunately, he was born with big gums, so they're very easy to paint. Yellow ochre is going to cover a lot of real estate as we apply it to every one of the pus bubbles over Rhino's body. Here too, I allow some of the bony matter to remain visible as a shadow color for the yellow ochre. I build up to full opacity at the apex of every bubble. Nothing needs to be smoothly blended at this point. I'm going to use a wash over this area to make it look super irritated and festering. That should smooth out any rough edges in addition to making the blisters look disgusting. I'm also using yellow ochre for Rhino's teeth. Everything on the miniature is going to get a simple highlight of ice yellow. I use it to add little dots and dashes to the face and teeth. Every single pus blister gets a little dot of ice yellow. I have thinned it just enough so it flows smoothly off my paintbrush. I'm going for full opacity with these highlights. I'm relying on the wash that'll come later to tie everything together. This also makes the painting go much faster than typical layering where I'm trying to achieve smooth blends with each layer. I use the side of my brush to highlight the rhino hide. My brush is lightly loaded with paint so it doesn't flow into the recesses. The hide is so heavily textured that this step takes almost no skill at all. It's very close to dry brushing, but my strokes are more controlled and deliberate. I'm focusing these highlights on the prominent flesh on the right side of the miniature. The rhino horn and back spikes get highlighted in much the same way. The final place I use ice yellow is for small bright dots within the eyes. What this guy needs now is a little color. I heavily thinned crusted sore by the army painter with water, and I'm using it to wash over all of the putrefied pustules on Rhino's arms and back. I extend this to the surrounding hide to increase the look of decomposition and disease. I also wash this over Rhino's mouth, and I use it in the recesses around the face. As a final touch, I add some to the base of Rhino's horn and spikes jutting from his back. I'm using muted green acrylic ink as a glaze to deepen the shadows on Rhino and give them a more interesting color. I'm confining these to the folds and wrinkles in the Rhino hide. I'm beginning these shadows in the existing shadow areas below Rhino, and I'm drawing them up into the folds of the more well-lit regions. I'm not coloring every crease with this, just the creases that are close to the existing shadows. The final touch is to add a little glistening blood to the eye sockets so they appear to glow red. And this is going to wrap up painting Zombie Rhino from the Marvel Zombies board game. I want to thank my incredible channel members for supporting the time I put into these videos. You too can become a channel member for as little as $1.99 per month using the link in the description below. Receive perks such as early access to videos, extended versions of our painting tutorials, and even a tier that lets you choose which miniature I paint next. Thank you so much for watching. Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to join our growing community of painters.